and welcome to episode 75 of the Sohbet Punx Podcast, the podcast about meaning, transcendence, awe, and spirituality with a small s. My name is Siobhan.
And I'm Dave, and you find us on an auspicious occasion. I don't know if auspicious is the right name.
Before you carry on, what does auspicious mean?
I'm not entirely sure. Today...
Well, it's probably an auspicious occasion then.
Today we are recording this podcast early in the morning.
Oh, yeah.
Which is very rare, so it might be completely different. I don't know, our minds might be different in the morning to the evening. I've never tested it because I've never listened to myself talk for an hour and a half
at different times of the day.
At different times of the day, so that's an interesting experiment. But one of the reasons for that is because today, hence the auspiciousness of today, is Shed 7 Day.
It's Shed 7 Day.
I've celebrated Shed 7 Day by spending the last hour listening to Manowar. So our lives are a very confusing place.
Generally, they are. Your music taste takes us on all kinds of journeys.
Not just music. We're about to do a podcast about meaning, transcendence, or spirituality.
Starting with Manowar.
Shed 7 are playing Margate Dreamland.
Yay.
We shall be attending. This is the first time I have ever seen Shed 7 live.
And it's their 30th anniversary tour of one of their albums?
It's almost certainly the 30th anniversary of when I first heard them and liked them.
That's true, yeah.
The first time.
You'd have been a little teen.
I was very young, in fact.
Then it would have been even longer ago than 30 years.
Oh, dear.
Oh, dear.
You looking forward to it?
I am.
Sorry, Shed 7, by the way, are a Britpop band from the 90s. Just in case you didn't know, they did a lot of they released what I consider a very good album, Change Giver, in the early 90s, which was very much a Britpop album. But I think, in fairness to them, they were they were like the OG. They were more like an indie band who happened to release an album just at the right time and managed to therefore be successful as a result. But you can judge that as you will. But then they had, a pappier later career where they released a lot of big band ballads, which I imagine you might have heard.
So when you were fanboying over Shed 7, pretty much the entire time I've known you.
Fanmanning. I think it's probably fair.
Fanmanning.
Once you're in your 40s, you can't fanboy anymore. You've got a fanman.
Fanmanning sounds like a very exciting hobby that you might have. I guess I only vaguely was aware of them. I think I knew that they'd been on the Big Breakfast, and I think that...
Very auspicious, being on the Big Breakfast.
And I think
probably about this time in the morning as well.
But because I never really had any reverence for Britpop because it happened literally when I was like, I don't know, the explosion of it, 94? I'd have been 5. 5
probably, but yeah, I mean, it was at its biggest. Yeah.
So Shed 7, I kind of lumped with, you're going to hate me. Like, Reef had that one-hit wonder, except they didn't. They've been a band and they've done loads of things, but they had that one song. And so I just lumped Shed 7 and I was like, Shed 7, yeah, didn't they have some, like, 1 or 2 songs?
How
did
you
a bit crap?
Bring Reef up again?
I know. I do that all the
time? We had a Reef Day a few episodes ago. Now it's a Shed 7 Day and you're still going back. What's the one song that you think Reef had? They had loads of different songs.
It might have been Chasing Rainbows, which is that
That's Shed
ballad.
7. You brought up Reef. What was Reef's one song?
Raise your hands. Do you want me to sing it?
No, I don't.
All right.
No. That's not their one song.
Well, it is if you're my age. That's the only song. And it still gets played. It's the end of the night song in every walkabout if they still exist. But anyway, so Shed 7 I just thought was, they did that pappy thing, but I'm very, very aware that they had some sort of Britpop time. But it was only when you forced me to listen to all their music.
Oh, that sounds
It was
bit
forced
harsh.
At the beginning, I would say.
If by forced you mean I put it on. yeah.
But
I didn't strap you to a chair and put headphones on you.
No, not quite. But
well, not at all.
But anyway, I think they're brilliant. They're so good.
Yeah, I know.
That, is it a Greatest Hits, the Going for Gold CD that you've got?
Yes, yeah.
So everything on that, I appreciate it is a Greatest Hits, but they're all just so wonderful. And I now think, oh gosh, I thought this band only had one song. They have so many songs. They're better than many of the other things that came out around that time, indie and Britpoppy. But like you say, do they really fit with Britpop, or are they more
I would say they're a quintessential Britpop band.
Quintessential, fantastic.
But again, only probably in timing. I mean, they there's a bunch of bands like that. They would just would have just been poppy indie bands who were already around for ages, and then they happened to release an album at the right time, and they all got big.
I love it. My understanding is that they're also still very, very good. They made an album last year.
No, it's not your understanding, Siobhan. I forced you to listen to that as well at gunpoint.
But I know
it's fantastic.
I know it's very good, and I think they've never stopped playing. Really, they always play like big hometown shows, and now they're doing this tour. So
no, they used to tour. As far as I was aware, they used to tour a bit like the Ramones. They used to tour once a year at Christmas, pretty much.
Aww.
And they would be really big. I was always surprised in the sort of in the kind of barren period. Post, a lot of these bands releasing albums and things, they would always play really quite big venues on their tours, and I always thought, who's going to see Shed 7 in 2010?
And now 2024.
Yeah,
it's this sorry idiot who's going.
So anyway, that's the punks aspect of this podcast taken care of. That discussion of Shed 7. Let's move on to the first section, as we always like to do. We like to tell you, the listener, one thing that we have done in the last couple of weeks, which has provided us with a sense of meaning, transcendence, or spirituality with a small s, or sort of something else. Just something that we'd like to tell you about. So, Siobhan, what have you done?
What have I done? Well, I feel like I am letting the side down a bit, because every week for the last few weeks I've come and been like, I need to pick it up a bit. And this is a little bit of one of them. But there is one thing that I did that I think brought me, I knew it would be nice to do, but it actually brought me a lot more meaning and joy than I probably have done before.
Was it listening to Shed 7?
No, because we haven't done that recently.
Was it listening to Manowar?
It might have been. No. It was writing a letter to my friend in Australia, Ashley. I think I mentioned before that I got a letter from her, and she listened to this podcast and shared her things that she does that brings her meaning, transcendence and awe and all that, which I thought was really nice. And I think usually when I'm writing a reply or writing generally, I kind of know what I'm writing, but a bit like my speech, it turns into a bit of a dribble. So this time I managed to set aside proper time to do it. And it took me about an hour and a half to write the full reply. But it was just really, really lovely to do. I felt like I was actually, not to say I don't make effort normally, but I felt like I'd actually made...
You don't make effort normally.
No, but I could feel the difference in making this amount of proper effort. And it makes me think about the worth in putting effort into anything anyway. I mean, writing a letter to your friend is an important thing to do. And so it should be given, you should give your effort to doing these things. But just that feeling of it's hard to quite word, but that feeling that you really actually put some effort in. And I think it's flow state as well. I think it's probably a little bit of, an hour and a half flew by, but I knew that I was trying really hard during it. Which I think that's kind of flow state sort of thing. And that's
absolutely a flow state sort of thing.
But I realised having it, how little I have it.
Well, I think writing anything down creates, well, not anything down, I suppose, but trying to put into words, and I'm sure to some extent, well, no, this is true of like typing things out as well. Although, I think I naturally would feel like it's better if it's pen on paper, but it's probably not really.
The Luddite in you.
But putting something down into words is quite difficult if you're trying to write something remotely worthwhile or remotely readable. So it definitely creates a flow state.
And I think it's that in between, like if I ever try and write words for songs for the band, I mean, I place it as too difficult a task, and therefore I don't really get in the flow state. I have dribs and drabs of flow, or not even flow, dribs and drabs of creativity, and I don't find myself really getting into too much of a flow, because I think it's one of those things that I have positioned as a bit too difficult. Whereas this, it just felt as that good in between of like putting effort in, but really enjoying it, and just kind of just getting into the flow of it.
Well, but there's no narrative, so that I don't think that's different from anybody. Nobody sits down to write. Well, maybe some people do. I think Manowar definitely do. sit down to write song lyrics and start at the beginning and finish at the end.
Yeah.
And make sure that every other line rhymes.
Yeah.
No matter how little sense it makes.
And just say loser over and over again.
They're really against losers.
And Sky. Just if you can't think of a rhyme
and
for
horses
Sky.
made of steel. But
Anyway, sorry, Manowar.
but the but yeah, whereas when you're writing a letter, or it's the same as if you were writing like a short story or something.
Yeah.
Because you're creating a narrative, it's presenting your brain with a different problem. Whereas I think song lyrics quite naturally, although there is a time and place for like editing them and kind of really putting some graft in to sort of form them into something worthwhile. Fundamentally, I think most people just get little bits of inspiration and then just wang them down on the page. Don't accept my word for it, Sean. I'm no expert.
No, but I mean...
okay, yeah.
No, but it's interesting to hear, because I don't know anyone else's point of view on that, to be honest, so it is good to hear other people's. Because again, I've decided I don't know how to do it, which is a silly...
Well, I don't think there is any such thing as knowing how to do anything, but particularly not that. Yeah. But whereas if you're writing a letter, it's something narrative, so there is a beginning and an end. And what you're doing is you're taking thoughts which are clearly there. So that's not there's no taxing element to knowing what you think.
Yeah.
It's a little bit like making this podcast, I suppose, and then you're trying to word them in such a way that makes sense to somebody else reading them. Yeah. And potentially, even if it's subconscious, you're probably trying to make them sound a bit flowery and fancy and literary in some sense, whatever that might mean to you. So it's sort of different, I guess.
Yeah. Yes, I think that I agree with all of that.
Did it give you like new ideas about what creates a sense of... So sorry, you were writing a letter about what creates a sense of awe in you, was it?
Not really even that. It was more... I mean, so Ashley had written a lovely long letter, and it was, it was a bit about having had a child, and she was like immediately really honest about those sorts of feelings, and then had these lovely bullet point lists of all the things she does that gives her meaning, transcendence, and all. So what I did is I literally responded to everything, and then tried to do like an explanation of just what my life has been like for maybe the year since I last wrote. So it wasn't specifically about meaning, transcendence, or any of that. Okay, but it was the thing that I took from it was I felt immediately how much effort Ashley had put into her letter. And I don't know whether, because I think she always does put effort in. I don't know if this was particularly more effortful or not. And maybe I'm in a place where I'm noticing it more, or in a place where I appreciate it more. Maybe I've changed. But I just was immediately struck by how much there was in this letter. And it inspired me entirely to try and do the same. And I just felt this need to have effort.
But what I mean is, by writing that, did you find out things about yourself that you were surprised to find? Did you end up finding yourself writing down things that maybe weren't so obvious to you before you started writing?
Yeah, I think so. In the same way when we had that conversation about, I just walked through the forest and it wasn't that big a deal, and you're like, what? And you talk it out and then you think about it. Yeah, I think I did get that from the writing. I can't think of anything specific off the top of my head that came up, but I definitely... When you have to frame something to someone else, you're like, oh, that is important, or oh, this is interesting, or I want to work on that. So yeah, I had a bit of that.
I suppose I just mean it's similar to a gratitude diary in that respect. You're using a slightly different... I think this is why it is. I don't really know if this is the actual like brain science behind it, but I think you're using a different part of your brain to write down things than you would to say them or to think them. And equally, saying them out loud is different from thinking them inside.
Yeah.
So, and all of those things are useful. So, one of the reasons why your inner voice is important, and that's why meditation is good. Your outer voice is important, and that's why conversation is good. But also, you're kind of, I don't know, writing things down. I don't know what part of your brain you would describe that as. But it definitely taps into something. I'm often surprised. One of the reasons why, I'm going to sound like a twat now, because by default, if you say one of the reasons I wrote poetry, ... you're always going to sound like a twat. But during
Take
COVID,
that beret off, David.
during COVID and for quite a while afterwards, I wrote a poem every day. Partly just to give myself structure, partly because I found exactly what you just described. I got into flow state for an hour-ish literally every morning. And obviously I had enough time to do that because we were all stuck inside. But I found that I was quite surprised sometimes. I would pick a subject. I had a kind of a system for it. I would have a subject that I'd normally, I'd sometimes even spend the day before, exploring that subject a little bit on purpose. Again, just to give myself structure, really, in order to have something to write about the next day. And that was really healthy. But then actually sitting down to write about, let's just say, I don't know, let's just say a kind of mildly political point that I thought I absolutely knew what I thought about. But in the writing of the poem, I sometimes found myself thinking, I'm quite surprised that that's where I ended up.
Yeah. It's like you're processing it somehow by, I think you said it's a little bit like doing the podcast, but it is a little bit like speaking something out loud or dealing with it tangibly. Like you say, it not being your inner voice anymore, and it kind of processing through you somehow, that you go, oh, I understand this now, or it's different to what I thought. But it makes it maybe a tiny bit real, or a tiny bit there's some level of processing you have to do to get it from your brain to on a paper.
Yeah, that
you don't do if it lives in your brain.
It literally makes it real as well, doesn't it? Particularly if you're writing down on a piece of paper.
Yeah.
It literally becomes a real thing. It goes from being inside your brain, a concept, to being an actual real thing. Even if you think to yourself, I'm shit at writing things, and this is rubbish, and you throw it in the bin, you've still made a physical embodiment of a thought or a thought process. I
wonder if there's something in this that is specifically the writing, not even the brain, the thought into paper. Because, for example, and maybe this is a silly thing to say, but if I ever needed to revise something or remember something, physically writing it, not repeating it, but physically writing it, always makes it goes in my brain.
I think that's famously how a lot of people learn. I think that's why you're supposed to take notes in lectures and things like that.
Like even just copying a paper to a paper, as in copying out of a book and stuff. So I wonder if it's not even just like that. Still must be some version of processing, and like you say, maybe it is the most famous way of learning. But I wonder if that getting your thought onto paper and having to express it properly does make you process it in some sort of weird way. And like you say, you find out things that maybe you didn't even know that you knew or felt.
Yeah, I have a terrible memory for facts, but when I've been working through my uni course, the subjects that I've had to write an assignment about, I remember far clearer than even if I put just as much effort into the actual course itself. The things that I've then taken the information that they've given me and pretty much, not entirely, it sounds like I'm just sort of copying. Obviously assignments or like essays and things, you're answering questions and what have you, but fundamentally you're taking a bunch of facts and then you're putting them in your own words.
Pulling it all together from
picking
sources
out
that already
bits.
exist.
Yeah. And that stuff I remember really well. Whereas some of the other things, and I've enjoyed loads of aspects of the course, and when I've been doing the course, there's been loads of things where I've thought, God, this is absolutely blowing my mind, and I've forgotten loads of the details about a lot of them. But equally, I've remembered a lot more generally from doing a course that I'm engaged with in a slightly different way to, for example, if I've sat down and watched a documentary about something, or if I've just read a book for fun about something.
Yeah.
Those things leave my mind much quicker, and I'm left with far less information from them than I am from anything, even the stuff that I've not enjoyed that much on the uni course.
It's having some form of interaction with it in some way.
Yeah, I think so.
But yes, that's my thing, writing a little letter. It was very lovely. So Ashley, if you're listening, it is on the way. It was going to be a surprise, but I think I already told you I've written it. So David, what have you done in the last couple of weeks that's brought you meaning, transcendence, or awe, or spirituality, or basically whatever you want to talk about?
Well, I think mine is about appreciating things that you've forgotten are something to appreciate. So it might take a little while to get there, but I think it fundamentally is doing something, but it's kind of about something too. So tomorrow, in fact, I thought, it's changed slightly, I thought we were going to scrap my car. And what's actually happening now, which I'm really pleased about, is that someone who's been basically keeping our car on the road for the last number of years and doing our MOTs and things is actually going to be taking it and teaching his son to drive in it. So I'm quite happy about that. But I thought right up until quite recently that it was going to be scrapped. In some ways that's not necessarily important, but it felt a bit, I didn't think I'd feel anything about it at all. But I've had the car for 20 years. The only car I've ever owned. I didn't pass my driving test until I was 23 or something. And at the same time, I got my first nursing job. So it was the first time in my entire life that I ever thought, fuck me, I've got some money. And so I bought a new car, which seems insane to me now. And I think I was probably a tiny bit manic at the time. But anyway, that's not necessarily important. And by bought a new car, obviously, I mean, got into a load of debt buying a new car and then paid it off over the course of about 6 years. But I got the car brand new. It was my little car, and has always been my little car, and has been the only little car I've ever had. And so anyway, so I've driven it into the ground, basically, or we both have to some extent. I'm sure you'll blame me, but I think it's fair to say that we've both driven it into the ground.
I take some ownership on that.
I've never really looked after it very much. I've never really seen the point in looking after it very much. I've never seen the point in even washing it, particularly, to be honest. I don't understand why people look after their cars in that way. It's just a car. It gets you around. It doesn't matter whether it's clean. It's going to rain at some point anyway. That's my Gino. It's full of shit. I still haven't cleared out the glove compartment, and the glove compartment's going to literally have 20 years worth of, well, I was going to say maps, but it won't be maps. It will be my handwritten directions from place to place, of which now I have no recollection.
Well, you have the excitement of trying to find out where that was. You also have the key to a mental health asylum in there.
Two. I have two. I don't think you should say that. I don't think I'm really supposed to have that.
Oh, it's fine. No one knows where you worked.
Yes. Anyway, if anyone ever needs to break out of any London psychiatric
I wasn't
hospital,
even thinking that.
Do let us know, because I might be able to help. I can't make any guarantees. So anyhow, the point is that like I say, I've had this car since I was what I would consider very young. I mean, I suppose 23. When I was 15, 23 seemed like quite old, but now I'm 44. I look back on 23 and think to myself, fuck me, I was like a little child.
You knew nothing.
Yeah, and that might well be because I just happen to be a very immature 23-year-old. That's probably quite likely, but also I don't know. I think I was very young and I didn't know anything about the world, and I got this car. And having never had a car and never been able to drive, it just provided me with the keys to the world in so many, and eventually the keys to psychiatric units, but the keys to the world, and I was able to do things that prior to that I couldn't dream of. And I remember now. I mean, I'd totally forgotten about it, but we'll get to why, I suppose. But it completely blew my mind that I could do all of these things. It gave me the opportunity. I moved away for a bit. Didn't really work out again. Think I was a bit manic. Moved, got my own little flat, and moved away. I went on tour a bunch of times in it. I did loads of different things that I could never have imagined doing prior. Anyhow, then having a car and being able to drive just completely normalised, like it has for us all, I'm quite sure. And to the point where, honestly, having a car was sometimes a bit of an annoyance. It meant you had to offer people lifts, for example. Or it meant that you could get places that it would have been nice to have had an excuse to not be able to get to, whatever. I'm not saying all the time. I just mean I'm trying to think of ways in which having a car was maybe mildly annoying. But at the very best, it was just there. It just was there, and it was just a car. But when I found out, or when I decided, or whatever the word is, that we were going to scrap the thing, I suddenly got a little feeling of kind of, that little car's going to get like smashed up. I just thought, I lived in it for a little while. So, I was going to mention that. Sorry. I just thought, I've had a lot of times in that car. And so all of a sudden, overnight, or not even overnight, literally within 5 seconds of going from, I'm just a person with a car, to, the car's going to get scrapped. I went to someone who was suddenly really fond of the car and was desperate to give it a good end of life. I'm pretty sure I had a dream in which we put our cat down, and the cat's dead. So, and we didn't put her down. So, I mean, I wasn't reliving that. But I thought to myself, I think that's the car. I think that's a metaphor for the car. So anyway, so So from that point, from that point forward, I changed my mind from, because I've really been someone recently, to be honest, we would have got rid of that car a long time ago. I don't really drive it. The only reason we kept it is because you need it to drive to work. And fundamentally, I would have got rid of it a long time ago. But, and so I have barely touched the thing. I don't give it any thought. It's not really, again, almost not my car. And I've gone from having that attitude to it to all of a sudden, right, how many different places can I come up with that we need to go to or that we can go to so that I can get a chance to drive the car for a bit? You know, how many long journeys can we do? And then that's moved on to, right, what albums does the car need to hear before it dies? Which ones does it listen to the most? Which ones have I played in there the most? And you know, and also, I mean, selfishly, it's not just for the car. I mean, clearly this is all for me, but I'm going to pretend that some of it's for the car. But you know, what experiences do I want to have in this car? And all of a sudden now, when I drive it, I'm suddenly really appreciating it and kind of enjoying driving it. Like I say, I just want excuses to drive the thing. And I suppose it's just got me thinking about how normalized really quite amazing things are to us all, I'm sure. And I mean, driving a car is an ideal example. I mean, it's only been in the last 100 years that cars have even existed. You know, it is actually magic that we can just go to a place, get a gun, shove it in the back of a thing with four wheels, fill it up with petrol, drive off to anywhere we want, including, you know, we could drive it almost around the world if you get on the Eurotunnel and drive, you know, you could
drive to China
and that's absolutely mind-blowing. And I suppose I just maybe, I'm not saying none of that, I haven't thought to myself I'm going to drive this car to China before we scrap it, but it wouldn't get there, no. But I suppose it's just made me appreciate this thing which had become completely normalised to me, to the point where I just did not appreciate it at all.
Yeah.
And it, you know, a lot of it is very normal psychological processes, I think. I mean, we do this about everything. We get a new job, we think the new job is brilliant, we spend 2 weeks thinking the new job is brilliant, and then a month later we start to notice things, or it normalizes and we start to not appreciate it anymore, and then we get kind of annoyed with silly little things that we didn't even notice when we were enjoying it. You know, we get a new, I don't know what, a new oven, and it cooks really well, and the old one was really shit and didn't cook very well and smelled of grease. And to begin with, we're like, my God, all this food tastes so much better than it used to out of the old oven. And then within a week, you're moaning because the food's, you know, maybe not quite as good or whatever. You know, it's completely normal, and it's what we all do. But I suppose it's just that it's about trying to appreciate that. And killing a car is quite a good way of suddenly appreciating all of the years and all of the experiences, and to some extent romanticizing all of those years and all of those experiences, and then getting a little positive feeling about said car.
That's nice. It's kind of, it makes me think of like a standard Stoic philosophy, which is, you know, if you're driving is one of the ones they use, if you're stuck in a traffic jam and you're getting annoyed, it's about changing the context. And one of those things is, imagine that you were blind this morning and you're now able to see, and therefore you're able to drive. Or imagine this is the very last time you'll ever be able to drive. Wouldn't you appreciate these things?
Yeah.
And there is something in that, about that changing context. And you had it happen to you, not through choice, but it's happened to you, and therefore. But I think the point is that the Stoics would say is you can make that choice to change the context of something, to then go, well, actually, why would I appreciate this? It's like when you hear screaming children, but imagine the world had no kids in it, and the human race was fucked, and then you heard a screaming child, you'd be like, this is amazing, children are around.
I mean, that sounded all right to me, but yeah, I thought you were going to say there was one screaming child. Just imagine if there was 50 screaming children.
I don't know. Or imagine you couldn't hear that morning and all of a sudden you can hear it. You'd be so appreciative for any noise. It's so much easier said than done.
Well, I think it's that then comes into mindfulness a lot, doesn't it? So mindfulness involves paying attention to what is actually going on all the time. And so in that context, you can enjoy anything. Yeah. But I mean, I think there's an element of mindfulness which is just appreciate and gratitude as well, I suppose. I mean, I had a hard time writing a gratitude diary because after a little while, and the same thing has happened with the car. To begin with, I was really into it. We've talked about this before. We started gratitude diaries at the beginning of the year. You've kind of continued yours. I did it for maybe a month. But the first 2 weeks was great, and I was really enjoying it, and I was really putting loads of stuff down. And then it became a real slog for the next 2 weeks, and I couldn't think of anything. And I was like, well, has my life suddenly got way worse than it was for the first 2 weeks of the year? It's like everything gone wrong. And I was like, well, no, nothing's really changed. But I can't think of anything to write down, whereas before it was really easy. And then slowly but surely it just tailed off, and now I don't do it. But and so that's a very similar example of something, being like a golden calf to begin with, and then losing it. But the art of writing about gratitude would have been something like, I drove from my house to Morrison's today. Isn't it amazing that I can do that? Isn't it amazing that my car gets me from here to there, and I don't need to use my legs, and then it carries home all the shopping that I wouldn't be able to carry myself, and I don't have to do that with a horse and cart, or I don't have to drag a big round stone. I don't know how they did it in the Flintstones.
I don't think they just put everything on a round stone and drag the stone.
That's how I remember it.
Yeah, the classic shopping trolley from the Flintstones. No, I think it's also what you were saying about it being easier in the first 2 weeks and not so easy afterwards is things like gratitude journals and things like consciously making those efforts. I think we feel there's a pressure to constantly find something new to be grateful for. And I don't think there's any harm in, and this is what I do in my book an awful lot, is I'm continuously giving gratitude for the same things, at least once every 4 or 5 times it's about the same thing.
Me.
It is often you. But do you know what? The same 3 or 4 things. And I think it's, I felt the same. It was like
my arms, my legs,
your ability to give me Manowar and Shed 7. But I think there is this, I think especially when we are aware, when you're writing something down, you're aware that there's like a second party. An imaginary second party. It's why we do the podcast. So this, the audience is the third party.
You are right imaginary, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, nothing's real. Remember,
you do not exist.
No one exists.
Except you also are judging us at all times. I think that's how this works.
Also, you're creating this podcast in your own mind, so it's crap.
And you don't exist. So this is just a disaster.
But I think there is this pressure that we put upon ourselves to be interesting or write well, or which is all good things. That's a good reason to write. I think we should. The effort for the effort's sake is definitely worth it, and it ends up creating something good. But then I do think it removes the slightly natural thing, and I think that's where the gratitude journal for me, I had to let that go for a bit, because I was the same. I was trying to write different things, and I was like, actually, I'm grateful for the same thing I was grateful for last week. It's the same with this part of the podcast when we talk about what we've done the last 2 weeks. Sometimes I'm trying to think of new things, but often it's the same things I've done the previous weeks. And
not very entertaining for the listener.
It's not very entertaining, though, is it? But I think I think in a realistic sense, recognizing that and recognizing that you're still grateful for things, I think is still a useful tool. It's not one that we immediately think to do, but I think it then keeps you grateful for that thing as well, and not just assuming it's the norm now. It's hard,
but I think it's one that we're all extraordinarily bad at doing.
Yeah,
particularly, we live in a modern world which has an insane amount of opportunity, even in comparison to 20 years ago, let alone 100 years ago.
Yeah.
And we spend most of our time moaning about it. I kept, to be honest, the car has really brought up one. I don't know why. I just keep thinking of airports. Like, it's fucking insane that we can get in a little tube and fly in the sky.
You almost don't want to think about it too much because it's scary.
And that we can just go to anywhere in the world in a very short period of time.
Yeah.
an incredibly short period of time for a lot of it, in ways
and
that
for very reasonable prices nowadays.
Insanely reasonable prices, that most people, not everybody, but most people can afford. And that is mental. Like, I was, 200 years ago, if you had said to somebody, you can fly 10,000 feet above, I don't know if that's right, 30, but 30,000 feet, or even 10,000, then let's make it smaller. You can fly 10,000 feet above the ground for 8 hours. They would have probably murdered their firstborn or something.
That big trip, all you Irish people that made that massive trip to America for days and days on a boat. You do that in 8 hours if you want.
But I mean, but I mean, even earlier than that, when there wasn't even boats, and it's just like but both the ability to travel, but also just the sheer ability to fly.
Yeah.
Like, we are a tiny little pinprick of time which has been able to get into a tube and fly. And prior to that, people would have thought it was fucking magic, like actual magic. And what do? We go to the most soulless places in the world. We sit around in our pajamas getting angry. If the plane is 10 minutes late, everybody starts moaning and getting up in arms. And stare at our phones. And there's, I've done this before, and I think I've actually brought this up on the podcast before. I've sat in airports and out the window, watched planes flying. Again, one of the most miraculous things that there is ever been. Like, this fucking tube on wheels with wings just wangs itself into the sky and is really safe. And not one person is looking up. Like, no one is amazed by it. Now, of course, you'd look like a lunatic if you were amazed by every plane that went over now. But we should be, and it's just like, because it's so normal, we just don't no longer sort of experience awe, I suppose.
Yeah. Like you say, we take it all for granted, and then actually complain. It becomes something to complain about rather than to marvel at.
Well, I mean, I don't know that many, and I include myself in this, by the way. This is not a holier than thou statement, but I don't really know anybody that wouldn't be like, oh, it's going to be a bit of a long flight, though. Oh, we've got to go to Gatwick. It's going to be a fucking ball ache to get to Gatwick, isn't it?
Or whatever. There's actually too many choices in certain things. You go, oh, really? Is it that airport and not this one?
Yeah, yeah. But again, we do the same thing. Everybody does it, But what we should be doing is saying, "What? I'm going to fly." That's fucking mental. Are you serious? I'm going to fly.
Can you be this exact version of yourself next time we go away, like as if you've never been before? But that's the thing. We've all been that person before.
Oh no,
like,
absolutely.
I remember the first time I flew, and I was like, "This is amazing."
Well, I was quite old. I mean, I never went abroad when I was a kid.
No.
We went to rainy Wales every year, so I think I was 20 the first time I ever flew.
Yeah, I was 18.
But then I think I moaned because I was piss scared, because I thought, oh, it's definitely going to crash.
Oh yeah. Oh gosh, of course, it had to be my first flight, ploughed in the ground. But yeah. So anyway, so I don't know. I think that's the same. I think it's the same as a car. Again, it's so normalised. It's so normalised to us to be sitting. It's been quite cold the last week. It's completely normal for us to just say, it's a bit cold, and turn the central heating on, and then we're warm. Yeah. And that's great. And I'm not saying that anybody should be without that or anything like that. I don't equally think that we should be standing by the radiator going, "Fucking hell, I'm warm." But if we could, but I think if you could have like just the tiniest little glimpse of that, almost in everything that we do. When you go and buy fruit from a supermarket, and it's like, this fruit has been grown, in another country. Yeah, it doesn't grow here at this time of year. Do you remember when we didn't have a toaster for ages, and then we got a toaster for the first time in maybe 5 years?
Yes.
And the way that we ate toast, like it was the best thing in the world.
Well, this has happened to us a lot because we're not very good at managing life. Like our fridge broke, and we just lived without a fridge for ages. When we first moved to Hastings, we had one of those tiny fridges and no freezer, and so therefore, I mean, it seemed a little bit like life was hard, but again, we should have been standing next to that little freezer and going, "What? It's cold in there?
Amazing!
You're fucking kidding me? I can keep food for how long?" But yeah, so yeah, and I think I personified. Sorry, I'm jumping around a bit. I personified, going back to the car. I personified it a little bit. And when we first decided to scrap it, I had this weird feeling of like, what if he feels it? Because I don't know. I don't really know what happens when cars get scrapped, but I imagine they go into one of those things that makes them into a square.
So yeah, when I told my friend about the idea of scrapping it, and she said, "Oh, you just drive it down Westfields, and then you hand it over, and then you'll watch it get picked up by the magnetic crane and dumped into the." And I was like, "Oh, no. I was like, Dave can't go."
Yeah,
like you have to like look away. It's like, you know, do you want to be with the animal when they put it down? You're like, no, just shut the vet doors. We'd have to drive you away from there so quickly.
And ironically, we'd have to walk away from there so quickly.
Oh gosh. But yeah, it's just that vision of it being picked up by a magnetic crane thing and then just dumped into. Yeah, it would be turned into a tiny box.
Yeah, see, so I'm quite so now I'm very happy that that's not what's going to happen to it. But then in a way, now I feel stupid about being happy about that, because obviously I am extraordinarily aware that it's just a car. And just some metal and some wheels, most of which have been replaced at some point anyway, so it's not even the same car.
What if you see it being driven around Hastings? What are you going to feel?
Oh, I think happy that it's got a little life. Yeah, probably. And then also I think it will be good, because I'm sure it won't last much longer.
No.
But I won't have to be there and know about it, so I can just assume that it's gone.
It went peacefully
happily tootling around the country, driving its way to China slowly.
Yeah, slowly. You can do it. Oh, bless him.
So in many ways, much of what we've just talked about could probably be seen through a Buddhist lens of some sort. Maybe not Manowar, or Shed Seven.
Manowar.
Well, you tell me.
Oh!
Hey, we're now going to move on to the main segment of the podcast, which is a continuation of last episode's segment of this podcast. If you haven't listened, maybe go back and listen. I think we might end up repeating ourselves a little bit, but it's probably worth listening to that first. We spoke last time. Well, we didn't really. We aimed to speak last week about how we started attending a Triratna Buddhist group in our local area. And what we actually ended up talking about really is the path that we've both taken in order to get to a stage where we might be interested in going to a Triratna Buddhist group in our local area.
Yeah.
So we more or less got up to a point, I think, last time, of we were about to go in the doors.
We're at the door.
And so we thought we would just continue. I had quite an interesting experience, actually. Maybe we should start with this. But we might end up repeating some stuff from last week. But so the last time that we went, we happened by chance to bump into a couple of friends on our way. And we were chatting for a minute, and they just said, "Oh, where are you off to?" And I just said, "Oh, we're going to a Buddhist group." Yeah. And then we left, and that was fine. And then I happened to see those friends again a few days later, and one of them sort of just asked me about it and just said, "So, like, you know, what made you go to a Buddhist group?"
Yeah.
And I found it quite difficult to answer, and she was interested, and so therefore asking a lot of questions. And I'm not sure that I necessarily had the answers to most of her questions, and the questions of which were all along the lines of kind of, what do you get out of it? What do you do? When I said, "Oh, you know, there's a little teaching session at the end," she was like, "Well, what have you learned?" And I had a bit of a job really putting that into words. And so it struck me that whilst I think, which I think we made clear on the last episode, I've really enjoyed it, and I think you've really enjoyed it. I found it quite difficult to put in words exactly what it was that I was enjoying. So I thought we could maybe start with that. If someone were to ask you, Siobhan, what you've got out of this group, would you be able to answer easily?
Let's see.
And the reason I bring this up is because I realised that, and in a lot of ways this is very similar to most Buddhist teaching, is that there isn't really an answer. There isn't really a simple answer that says, what I wouldn't say is, we went there. So the way it works is you meditate, pretty much it's half and half. You meditate for the first half.
Yeah.
And then you have a little kind of teaching-y thing / discussion thing, which sometimes is a bit more like a ritual.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about all three of those things, but I wouldn't say that any one of them made me walk out of the place with a big smile on my face, feeling like, oh my God, that was amazing. I feel amazing. I did pretty much walk out thinking, God, that was amazing. And then we've always had quite long conversations about why that might be.
Yeah.
But it's not as simple as I went in sad and I came out happy, or I went out not feeling very good and I came out feeling really good. It's much more complicated than that. And I'm not sure that and this is not ideal for a podcast, of course, but we did make this clear when we changed the name of our podcast that a lot of the things we were going to be talking about were specifically things that can't be put into words.
Well, it can't be put into words, and also we're novice as heck about it. So, and which is the point,
Not after 75 episodes. I don't think we can say we're novices.
Yeah, some of them we were discussing terrible films. So.
Yeah, but we've been doing this for many, many hours.
No, but I mean about accessing spiritual things and stuff.
Yeah, and Buddhism certainly.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I'm going to find it hard without describing exactly what we do in the group.
Well, we need to do that too. So feel free to do that.
Like you say, I'm going to start from even before then. You get this really lovely welcome on the way in that I think we definitely struggle with, being socially awkward nincompoops. But I love being challenged with that every time. And it shouldn't be a challenge. Being warmly welcomed is not a challenge.
People being nice to me is a huge challenge.
But it definitely brings up some things about us and not the group. But these are people who, they're not interested in you. They're not interested in recruiting you. They're being nice because they're being nice. They're not saying, I'm being nice so you can, come every week. And, if you're not interested in it, you're welcome to not be there. And it's not standoffish either. That makes it sound standoffish. It's just, you've come, welcome, can I get your tea order for later? And please sit here. And, you can have this, you can have that. So it's really nice for the sake of being kind to someone else, just for the sake of it.
I think
which
also
I think
that,
is a big...
just quickly, that fits in very much with the Buddhist idea of sort of, I suppose, it's not how it would be described in Buddhism, but sort of living in the moment. The idea is that we've turned up to this group, and for the next 2 hours we're in this group.
Exactly.
And everyone else is in this group.
Exactly.
And that's the end of it. Every minute is just the end of itself.
Exactly.
Exactly. And I think that fits in that context.
And no one's interested in so how Buddhist are you? So what? Those conversations come up later for pure interest, but not for judgment. But there's definitely none of that kind of... You feel that you are absolutely allowed to be there. Because you are, but you are made to feel that way. For that, exactly how you explained it, I think you explained it really well. And then, so, you kind of mooch about. There's seats you can sit in, or there's cushions and things that they provide you with. And that was the first little, figuring out how to sit down. I mean, I sat down and I was convinced. I've done meditation at home, thought I knew what I was doing. And the person who was leading it immediately was like, oh no, don't sit like that. And it was I could have felt really awkward about it. Yeah. Well,
she was quite kind.
She was very kind, but if you were feeling in any way inadequate, which I often sometimes do, you could feel maybe worried, but no, wasn't like that at all. It was really lovely. So yeah, you taught how to sit, and then there's loads of different parts to it. There's a saluting merits at the beginning. I've definitely going to have gotten all that wrong, but there's a little
just if anybody is a Buddhist, or particularly if anybody is a part of this group, we are definitely not going to get the names of everything right. Yeah. So we'll try not to even try to use them and just describe the thing. But yeah.
But there's so immediately you do this little call and response thing at the beginning to kind of set your intention for the session, and I think that's I really like it as you do just shed everything that you came with. And the time before, like you said, you're here, no one cares about where you've been or who you are, which I think is, there is no other place where it's like that. I mean, probably other religious and spiritual spaces, but if you go to work, I try and do this with work. If you kind of feel a bit poo and then you go to work and you're like, right, I'm going to try and leave personal out of this and just get on with work. But no, that is not the way that most people live their lives nowadays. If you go, so how are you? Oh no, this is awful, or this is that. You're like, well, you're here now. Like, it'd be good to just move past that and enjoy what you're doing right now in the moment, like you say. But it doesn't always happen.
There's not a huge amount of Well, I mean, again, it's very, very minor amount of experience, but there's not a huge amount of talk about. Like, I have no idea. We found out what one person there does for a living, for example, but not through him telling us, just through. It turned out that he works with someone we know.
Yeah.
You know, you don't really talk about
yourself
or your life or your day.
No.
You talk about what you're there to talk about. And
I think that's really, especially as it's somewhere where, you know, Buddhism is about dissolving the ego and all that other stuff. So I guess it is at the heart of what it's about in some respects. But it is just refreshing to turn up and be like, this is not about anything prior to this session. It is all about being in this session right now and taking something from it, which, yeah, you know, everyone took with baggage to loads of stuff. And what happens if we decide that baggage or leave it somewhere and just get on with something? You get a lot out of it. So I think one big reason we get a lot out of it is the setup. You are there for 2 hours to just completely immerse yourself in what is to us a new, wonderful, fantastic, really fantastical, mystical thing that we don't understand.
Sometimes mystical and sometimes very practical.
Yeah, true.
And I think it starts with the very practical. So then from that point onwards, you move on to a meditation.
Yeah.
I think in Triratna, again, I don't want to say this with any sort of expertise, but what the little bit that I've read and kind of our experiences, I think there's more or less 3 different types of meditation fundamentally. I mean, they're done in different ways, but one of them is just concentrating on breath, which I think is probably, if anybody's ever experienced meditation, is the one that they're most likely to have tried or taken part in, and that is literally just putting all of your concentration onto your breath and not really doing anything else much. There is more to it when you're being guided, but fundamentally that's what you're doing. Then there's loving kindness,
metta bhavana,
which is, that might not be the word, which I find difficult because I can't picture anything in my brain because my brain doesn't work very well. But but with that one, what you're doing, and we can talk about this one because this one's quite interesting.
I like this one a lot.
But you kind of get a feeling of love for somebody. This is all going to sound very spacey. I've got so used to it now that it doesn't sound that spacey to me, but I'm just going to sort of say it. You get a feeling of love for somebody that you love, and you try and discover that feeling, how you're actually feeling inside, and then you concentrate on that feeling.
Well, you try and create the feeling.
You create the feeling,
that feeling, like that heart fluttery feeling that you physically feel. You try and physically get to that point where you are physically having that feeling, isn't it?
And then and that's obviously quite easy to do with somebody that you actually care about. Yeah. But then you try and maintain that feeling, and you think about someone you feel indifferent about, and then you try and hold that feeling and think about someone that you have difficulties with, or, you know, maybe in the secular world we might say someone you hate. You wouldn't say that in Buddhism. And that's interesting for a lot of reasons, but we'll come back to that. The other one, which I don't think we've actually done in the meeting, although tell me if I'm wrong, is more like a body scan type of one. So I've done a guided one by a Triratna monk. Monk is the right word, but on my own, which is more like a body scan one. So I think I'm right in saying those are the sort of 3 main, and they're all you can do those in different ways and stuff. Yeah,
you can also do like contemplative ones. Is that the word? Or ones where you have like a thought to think about, and you kind of go with that and you can, and those I personally find are just way better guided, because otherwise I really do lose my train of thought. And I find that one kind of hard because I'm just like, the difference between thinking and contemplating, whereas, you know, meditation, you're not really meant to think, but you can observe your thoughts or observe your contemplations. And I find, you know, and contemplating is different from meditation anyway, or mindfulness, but those ones we haven't really done too much.
I don't know. The thing is different schools of Buddhism do different types of meditation, and I might be wrong. So do keep that in mind, everybody listening. This might be completely wrong. I don't think Triratna does that.
Oh, okay, cool.
So
cool.
I might be, or at least that's not one of their main ones. I'm sure they do.
And I do think contemplation is held separately from at least mindfulness, at the very least. But meditation,
because I know that there's other schools that do things like you look at a candle and then you shut your eyes and you try and continue to picture the candle, and then
or Zen.
Well, Zen is just breathing, really, but it's breathing with your eyes open or staring at a wall. And also full of weird shit. But and there's other like mantra meditations, which I think tend to come more from Hindu schools, but I think some Buddhists do mantra meditations.
Well, and transcendental meditation is
that's a mantra. But again, that comes more from a school of sort of Hinduism. But I do think that there's some, and certainly we do what I would consider, but may not be described by the Triratna group as this, but I would consider kind of mantras, but out loud. As part of the meeting. So some of that call and response stuff that we do is basically a mantra. You're just repeating the same things
definitely.
over and over again. With transcendental meditation, the idea is that you've got a sound, more or less, which doesn't mean anything. So you're not saying. So the breathing meditation, what you can do is you can do something like in out. So as you breathe in, you say in. As you breathe out, you say out. But of course, you know what the words in and out means, or you can count them. But you know what numbers mean.
Yeah.
Whereas in transcendental meditation, what you get is you get a mantra, which to you means is basically gobbledygook. Again, they definitely wouldn't consider it gobbledygook. I mean, there'd be
some magical way as to why you came to it.
You have to pay an awful lot of money in order to get somebody to allocate you your gobbledygook. But
you had one.
But
did you decide yours and you're not allowed to talk about it?
No, I've talked about it a lot. So, I bought a sort of knockoff version of transcendental meditation over the internet. But the point is that the idea of that sound is that it doesn't mean anything to you. So you're concentrating on this thing that has no connotations. So of course, if you said, oh, well, my mantra is, I don't know, cat, something, and you would sit there and say cat, cat, cat over and over again in your head, you would either think of a little fluffy lovely fellow, or you would think of that grass that Somali people eat and go a bit mad as a result of. So but whatever the connotation is, the point is it has different connotations for different people. Whereas just a noise, just going bang, bong, dong, or whatever, that's not my mantra. It doesn't have any connotation. So the idea is it takes you away from conscious thought. Yeah. Obviously that depends on how much you can get away from conscious thought, because my brain just furiously tells me that I've got to go to the shops or something whilst I'm making that noise in my head.
There's a man in your head that just freaks out every time you try and turn it all off. Like, no, but we need to be panicked about something.
I wish he was a little man. He's he's like a gorilla.
That massive meatloaf in your brain.
Yeah. Well, as in Meatloaf the singer.
Yes.
Yeah, it is.
He's a massive
and he's confused.
And he's drunk and he's confused and the lights are off.
And he's got his Fight Club tits.
Yeah.
So he's very confused.
And he's as pissed as he was at the Australian football
and
game.
He's constantly shouting at Gary Busey about how he's stolen his pencils.
He doesn't know where his pencils are. Yeah. And he's scared.
That you're describing the inside workings of my mind quite well. And then every now and again he just cracks out with a lovely tune.
He's drunk.
But let's talk about the loving kindness one a bit, because I think that's quite interesting. So what do you think, how would you, because I think we've talked about, like, I suppose, again, I can only use sort of crappy words for this, but we've talked about sort of trying to like share love with people that you don't necessarily like and what have you. I mean, what do you see the point of that as?
So I feel like I can actually answer this question, because I read a book called Start Where You Are. I've mentioned it before, by Pema Chodron. It is a Buddhist book, and I read it. It's probably the gateway. In fact, I definitely would have mentioned it last week. One of the gateway
I don't
books.
think you did, but you did say that a different book was your gateway book. So be careful.
Oh, sorry.
Otherwise, this won't make any sense.
No, I know. So there is that.
Siobhan's had all sorts of different gateways.
Thich Nhat Hanh wrote a lovely book, but Pema Chodron wrote a book called Start Where You Are. That phrase alone literally sings to me, and it's a book about compassion. So the whole point is about cultivating compassion and all the different ways in which you can do it and the different points at which you should do it. And she describes really clearly what I now realise is this metabhavana, loving kindness, cultivation thing. And it's about, there's loads of different ways of doing it, but she says there's a way, you have to start by having that feeling. So she describes a really horrible situation because she says the quickest way to do it is actually in a quite a horrible way, especially if you're having compassion for others when you feel bad. So she names, she saw a horrible moment once where she saw a dog being attacked, stoned by people. Really, really nasty. But she knows that if she only has to think of that, her heart, she feels a feeling in her, and it's compassion for others. And so the cultivation of this loving kindness, we do it because it's far easier and nicer to start by thinking of something nice and go down from there. But the idea for me, and I really do feel that it works, is it's about having compassion for people and not just the people that you do love. So in loving kindness one, we do start with the people we love, then the indifferent, and then the people that we find it difficult to be with. The whole point of it is to have it for everyone. And you do have to practice it, because I think this is something, since reading that book and definitely since it being introduced as a practice, I've realised that this is something I really do struggle with. And I think, gosh, I don't think it'll just be me. I do think it's hard to have compassion for people who frustrate you. And actually, it's at the point at which people are frustrating you that you forget to even have compassion for them. You're just like, this person's so annoying. They could only be doing this to annoy me. Or how do they not know that they're being this way or being frustrating? And it's exactly at those moments that if you practice it enough, and that's why they say it's cultivating loving kindness, is to, in those moments, try and tap into that. If you make it a feeling, which is why I think this idea of recognizing that it is a feeling, like that love feeling that you have, if you can remember that, and if when you're practicing it, if you can have it whilst you're thinking of someone you don't like, it does make it easier to have it in the moment when you're dealing with someone you don't like. It's muscle memory. And so it's about,
it's the same as concentrating on your breathing, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's about staying calm as much as anything else. Once it's ingrained into your brain that that's something that you're doing, even if it's subconscious, you're not constantly thinking about your breathing, but you're more aware of it.
100%. And it doesn't always translate, obviously, and it's a work in progress, and goodness, I don't know if there's few people in the world that I imagine can just truly say that they have love for everyone, including people that are awful. But I feel like I can really definitely see the relevance of doing that practice. That's why I really like it. It's probably my favourite one. But when you say the visualising is really difficult, because I know you struggle to visualise anything. Yeah. That's why I'm an
A fantastic.
You're an A? You're A. I knew you were fantastic.
No, an A fantastic. the very, I don't even know if that's how you say it, but the very opposite of fantastic.
But I think that's why they concentrate on it being a feeling, I think. And that's why I find that book that I read, the Start Where You Are book, interesting, because it's not about visualizing it and spending a long time visualizing it. That's why she's got this horrible thing, because she said it's the quickest way to get the feeling. If I sit there trying to envisage people that I care about and envisage good things happening to them, it takes a long while. But I know I'm going to immediately feel that feeling and it's different for everyone, when I think of a certain thing, and you don't necessarily have to picture it at that point. It's just like, I don't know, PTSD, having memories. Like, not PTSD as strong as that, but like memories of things create that same feeling. So it's just whatever that is going to do that thing that makes your heart have this little melt feeling. Yeah. But yeah, no, I probably waffled right off it there, but I think that loving kindness meditation is really, really helpful specifically for compassion for others, and specifically compassion for people you don't like and compassion for everyone. There's a really nice end to that meditation where you extend that feeling. Yeah. So you have it for the person you love, the indifference, the enemy, and then you widen it. And the Start Where You Are book talks about it, where you have it for everyone in the room, then you have it for everyone in your local area, and then it's like the feeling of putting it out to the whole world. And if you kind of go with that, whether you genuinely believe that you're throwing energy out there, or at least if you can like follow the metaphor, you can kind of feel this feeling of everything being huge and everything being one, even if you're not directly believing it.
Well, but it's not necessarily about believing it either, is it? I'm sure there's loads of different ways that you could take that, but one of the ways that I would think of that is in a metaphorical way, in as much as if you can do that enough times, what you're not doing is you're not creating that feeling of love, spreading it out across the entire world and making the entire world feel that, even in a microscopic way. You know, that's you know, too magical. But I suppose the point is that as a metaphor, what that does is it leaves you, and more importantly your subconscious or something going on completely unbeknownst to you, to then feel that way more about everybody else in the world, in your day-to-day life.
Exactly it.
I think it's a metaphor that is kind of forcing you into a viewing the world in a very, and it's like microscopic steps.
And it's about, I'm definitely going to fluff this, but in one of the books I've read this year, it might be Start Where You Are, but it might be a different book. Compassion literally means like feeling for others or something like that. It is specifically not about it being you.
Oh, yeah.
So even the specific word is about getting out of yourself and being for others. And so another way that Start With You Are book does it, and the point of the love and kindness and to remove it from yourself and to give it to other people, is when you're having a hard time, it's about taking yourself out of your hard time and being like, I mean, a way out of it is to think of other people at that time. It doesn't feel like the thing to do. Like if you've just been told some crappy news, the immediate feeling is one of, you know, feeling sorry for yourself or wallowing and you turn very inwards. The Start Where You Are book says at that moment, breathe in love, breathe out love, and heal yourself, but think of other people and be like, actually, do you know what? Probability is that there's millions of people having this exact same, like I'm not special. What's happening to me is probably happening to tons of other people. What if I could, when I'm, you know, breathing in and breathing out and calming myself down, what if I could be sending that energy out to everyone else? And again, it's a big metaphor. She speaks of it very literally. But at that moment, think of other people. And it's all contextualized because then you're not thinking of yourself for a moment. The only reason you're in pain is because you're thinking of yourself. True, something horrible might have happened to you.
But fundamentally, I think it helps you.
Yeah.
And I'm not necessarily saying that's what it's for. Buddhism is definitely not a sort of selfish act and shouldn't be a selfish act. Although I think, as we touched on a little bit last time, it's been turned into one. It's like mindfulness is something that makes you feel better about your life, and you can be better and you can do better at business and whatever bullshit that people are using it for. But it's about that ability to not just be annoyed with the world, also or not just feel sorry for yourself, but feel sorry for other people. And I suppose fundamentally, and this is the ultimate teaching, I suppose, of Buddhism, is that we're all kind of one, is the idea, and that's the whole no self thing, which I can't pretend to fully understand, but we can have a crack at talking about that if you want. But you know, is that it actually fundamentally helps you to deal with your difficult situation. I've got a really good, potentially, rather sad, and sorry, I didn't know I was going to be talking about this. I'm not sure we've ever talked about this before, but so when I very first qualified as a nurse, about the same time as I got the car, funnily enough, I'm not going to say too much about the person because it was a patient that I was nursing, but there was a patient on my ward that I was one, I think possibly like my first primary patient or something. So, you know, I was working quite closely with him. Obviously, it was, in hindsight, it was quite a superficial sort of relationship, but it seemed like a big deal to me. I was new at the job, and
you want to do well.
Yeah, and we were concerned that he might have HIV. And he was very mentally ill, but we managed to get a blood sample out of him. And whilst we were getting the blood sample, the doctor, who was very new, dropped the syringe. And who was also very new, without thinking about it, just bent down to pick up the syringe and got a needle stick injury. So as a result of that, I spent what was like actually in the end 6 months, I suppose, because it's a weird process that you used to have to go through, or probably still do, I guess, of not really knowing. It was quite unlikely that I would have got HIV from this needle stick injury, but it obviously there was a vague chance, and so I had to go through this process where I obviously had a lot of blood tests. I had to actually take HIV medication for I think 2 months or something, which was really fucking horrible. It's not nice stuff to be on. Again, I think it's probably slightly better now, but it's still probably horrible. But the point is that, so on that day, this patient who I was working closely with had an HIV test done because we were worried that he had HIV. And on that same day, I got the needle stick injury. So our timeline was exactly the same. And so 3 months down the line, after me not knowing, the needle stick injury may have not been a big deal. Well, it's always sort of a big deal, but he may not have actually even had anything. So 3 months down the line, he found out that he actually had HIV, and I actually had to go and tell him. And it was mad because it was the day that I also found out that there was a small chance that I might also have HIV as a result of a needle stick injury from this guy.
Yeah. But
it was even worse. So I was devastated, obviously, because I'd found out this news, which was potentially very bad news for me.
Yeah.
But it was so much worse for him.
Yeah.
And because I was so involved with him, it meant that a good deal of my compassion was like, fuck me, this poor
man
person who's slightly better from mental health wise, which is almost worse, I suppose, because you're getting this horrible news. And so my compassion totally went out to him without, and I certainly wasn't thinking of this in Buddhist terms by any means, or even trying. I wasn't doing anything. I wasn't trying to be a great person or anything. I mean, I was, again, very young, and I was very bothered about my own well-being. But because I was so involved with this guy, and because he had actually had the worst possible news you can have, or really bad news, and what it meant was that I was just worried about him, mostly for the period of time where had that been slightly different and I had just been completely separate from it, I would have been absolutely devastated for myself.
Yeah, if you just picked up a random needle.
Yeah,
then someone had said, "Shit, that might have been HIV blood,"
and then gone
you've
through
never
it
matched
separately.
a person to.
Yeah.
And that's context, isn't it? Because had that happened, the Buddhist way of thinking, or the send your vibes outwards, is, oh shit, I got pricked with that. The idea would be trying to imagine who that person was.
Yeah.
And being like, oh
but
shit, I've been pricked with it, but goodness me, someone actually has it. Who is that person? That's really sad. But you were actually able to practically have that.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess that,
So it was like a forced version of this. That is what I'm trying to say.
But
I definitely wasn't wise enough, and I definitely wasn't caring enough for that to be what I was concentrating on. But as a result of the situation, I was forced into it. And what it did was, it made the next, because I then had to wait 3 months and go through lots of different blood tests and do various different things. And at the end of it, I didn't have HIV and it was all fine. But I had to go through those 3 months worried about the not knowing, because again, it takes so long to show up in your blood. Yeah. I just had to wait it out, basically.
You had the same first 3 months he had.
Yeah, almost, exactly. And then I was sort of all right. I dealt with my own bad situation so much better than I would have had I not had someone else to sort of worry about. And I think that's there's something bigger that you can do there, whereas where you can, no matter how bad your circumstances are, or how bad your life is, or how bad something that's happened to you is, if you can think about it in the context of maybe, potentially other people have it a lot worse off. And I mean, of course, an awful lot of maybe even goes back to that plane thing, but on the other end, it's like an awful lot of our concerns, like a plane being late, are so minor and so dumb and so silly, but we still manage to get ourselves all worked up about them. Somebody doesn't let you cross on a pedestrian crossing, so you want to kick them on their bumper. as we established last week. There's such minor, ridiculous things that we get upset about. And, of course, lots of people also face really difficult things.
Yeah.
But there's always context within those difficult things. And I think that what we're told to do, and sorry, I have gone off point quite a lot, but what we're told to do in society is to just, like, when you said about compassion being specifically what it means is thinking about other people, basically. Self-compassion, I think that is a saying that I've heard people use, but if they haven't literally used those words, they've used something similar. It's kind of what we're encouraged to do now. In fact, the reason that most people do mindfulness, as an example, is 100% like self-compassion. It's your self-care. It's looking after yourself. Well, actually, how you really look after yourself is you worry about other people, and you make other people's lives better, because that also makes your life in a much more meaningful way than just I want this, so I'm going to go and buy this, and that's self-care.
And that's 100% the message that. So on the day that we did the Metta Bhavana practice, we then had a little session afterwards about. So like you say, the sessions afterwards are varied, and on this particular one, we had a small discussion followed by some ritual, followed by some chanting, and whereas we can talk about the others. And I remember very specifically, this is the conversation we had. So it's not just that we've arrived at this, and this is the thing I really loved about Buddhism so far, and just generally reading about it loads and going to these sessions, is the repetitive nature of what you learn, because it's so complicated and yet so simple, but very, hard to explain, easy to feel once you do it. And that's the whole point of Buddhism. It's these massive things you can't quite put into words, yet when people do and you understand it, it resonates, so it's simple. And this was specifically what I talked about. It's about helping others to feel better, and it's not doing it in order to feel better, because then you kind of aren't doing it. It's about trying to forget yourself, appreciating that everyone is, that everyone is one thing. I think they talked about that magical Avalokitesvara person at this point.
1,000 arms.
1,000 arms. They had to, but they cried so hard, or they break loads of, I can't remember, but eventually they hurt themselves so much carrying lots of fears, or I don't know, and end up having 1,000 arms. And the point is that every time they help someone, it breaks off and more arms happen, and da-da-da-da. But the point being that everyone does their little bit. We're all one. We all help each other, and in the end, you help yourself, but it's not why you do it. I just completely fluffed that bit as well, but it's definitely what I mean to say is the thing that we're talking about now actually is the point of compassion from the point of Buddhists as well. It's just and it just makes sense.
Well, it's leaving yourself behind as well, isn't it? And I mean, it's another thing that I think we're all so used to in the modern world, is that our identity, and I don't mean that in an identity politics way, I mean our identity, like who we think we are,
eidos,
is of utmost importance to us. And that is the important thing, and that is going to dictate everything that we do. It's going to dictate the people that we're willing to engage with or not engage with. It's going to dictate pretty much everything that we think.
And we're at the height of that now, thanks to the capitalist world that's forcing that agenda through more than ever. Always has, but more than ever now. But
in so many ways, this is an aspect of just losing that identity. And it fits in. There's something that I remember writing this down. I think I've even brought it up, that I've written it down and never talked about it. It's similar to Maya, which is a Hindu idea, which I've definitely mentioned before, but never managed to.
We've threatened to do lots of podcasts about that and still haven't done it.
But it is quite similar in as much as, so the idea of Maya, and again, you can look at this as metaphorical, but I think in a lot of Hindu traditions, it's quite literal. Is because reincarnation is seen as being absolute. The idea is that we aren't I am not like Dave. I'm an everlasting spirit that happens to currently be in Dave at the moment. So it doesn't matter what the colour of my skin is. It doesn't matter what gender I am. It doesn't matter what I think here and now. It doesn't matter, and this is maybe the negative side of it. It doesn't matter if I've been born into poverty or if I've been born into riches. Although again, maybe there's a positive side to that even as well. But the point is that I'm none of those things. That's not what I am. I am like a spirit. Who happens to be in this body at the moment, and I think that's how Rich Roll describes himself every time he's asked. Right. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience. Yeah, and I think that's really nice because but on the one hand, what you could say is So you could use that as an argument for like, oh, just shut up, everyone, about this thing that you're worried about. I'm sick of hearing it. But I'm not talking about it in that context.
No.
I'm talking about it in the context of how much better that makes your own life. You're like, all of a sudden, I'm not worried about. And again, it could be a damaging thing. If you're born into abject poverty and you think to yourself, oh, well, don't worry, in the next life, I'll probably be something way better than this, so I'll just live an awful life this time round. And obviously a lot of Christian theology kind of suggests that as well, and there's a lot of discussions to be had about that. But does that equally, if you're born into poverty and chances are you're going to live in poverty your whole life, would having that attitude make your life better? Yeah, probably would, actually.
Well, that's what, oh god, I can't believe it's going to be the 75th episode, and I'm probably going to mention Mo Gawdat again. But in his happiness equation book, Solve for Happy, Mo Gawdat explicitly explains that as well. He says there are people that have it so objectively bad, living in, like you say, complete poverty, and he goes, but when you see videos of some of those children when people have gone out to help them, then some are obviously miserable, but you see so many people that are happy. Well, and it's context, because it's like, imagine you're in the shittest situation, but you manage to find something that day that resembles a ball, and therefore, oh my god, I'm the richest person in town, I've just had a football, even though it's a cabbage. It's probably not a cabbage, and you probably want to eat that cabbage, but I'm completely fluffing and being an awful person here. But it's context again. It's like, well, everyone's able to be happy. Not saying people in poverty should be happy, and I guess that's what you were saying, like, you make the best of it no matter what. But there is an element of everything is contextual, and if everything is really, really good for you all the time, and then you get a little bit more good, you don't see it as amazing. But imagine try and change that.
The difference is how we judge happiness, though, isn't it? So how we all judge happiness, and this is even more true often of supposedly anti-capitalistic people. Yeah. How we judge happiness is purely through capitalistic means. Yeah. It's the hierarchy of needs thing. Totally reasonable. I'm not saying we should never celebrate anybody living in poverty ever. There's no question about that. But happiness is not necessarily getting 3 square meals a day. If you're a happy person living in a tribe somewhere or whatever, and it's quite, I think it's racist, and I think it's quite ignorant to sort of assume that we have worked out life and that we're doing better than everybody else,
100%.
Because what, like you're saying, if somebody lives in a tribe in Africa and doesn't have any money and, in your words, gets given a cabbage and thinks that it's a football and is really excited about that.
Oh my god, that's I'm so sorry.
But no, that person is almost 100% happier than an incel sitting in his parents' basement 100%. Eating crisps because everything about their life is better. They're getting fresh air, they're getting fresh food. Like now again, they're living in poverty, and that's not a good thing and should not be celebrated. And I'm not sure, there's obviously a disparity there in so many ways, but it's like, what is happiness? Well, happiness is actually feeling happy. Not that many people in the Western world feel that happy. Now that isn't to say therefore, oh, we've got it all the wrong way around. All these poor people living in poverty are actually the lucky ones, and they should be happy. I'm not saying that, not in any way, shape, or form. And of course, we should be aiming to not have that disparity. But what is happiness? And I don't think that we in the Western world currently, what we think of as happiness is what actually happiness is.
100%, and it's definitely something about seeing people as. You were saying that kind of it's racist and all of that. It's this idea, it's this Western versus what people have named primitive. Like the History of Magic book that I've referenced loads of times, Chris Gosden wrote that. He specifically wrote this book. It's about the history of magic, but it's actually a history of humankind and about what we've lost because we have science that poo-pooed religion, that poo-pooed magic. And something gets lost from the magic and the religious part. It's half of what we're doing.
Boffin's fault.
It's the Boffin's fault that science has removed, and we look at people as backwards who still live in tribes and still have this, spiritual belief about the world. But there's something so, like you say, people look at the way that the West is and probably think, what the fuck? I just watched Pocahontas, the Disney film the other day.
Christ, we've really gone round.
Yeah. But that, obviously it's terrible and it doesn't amount to the correct telling of the story. But that's the whole point of that. It's people from England coming over to the New World, seeing the Native Americans as savages and saying, but we've come to make your life better, is what they say. And they're like, what do you mean better? Our life is amazing. What's wrong with you? No. We'll build buildings and you'll have all this wonderful stuff. And they're like, but we have such a good life. What's wrong with you? Yeah, I just think we definitely in the West think that we've got it all right and there's a lot that we're missing.
But the worst thing about that description, anyway, just taking that on face value, and not necessarily making a huge statement about colonialism or anything, but is that everybody thought that they were doing right by everybody else, right? Yeah. If you think, our way of life is the right way of life, even if that's based on pure racism, when you go over and try and force other people to have that lifestyle, it's a bit like trying to force democracy on all of these Middle Eastern countries and stuff. It's like, I'm not excusing it or saying that it was in any way positive or in any way a good thing, but it's people trying to do right by each other, but by trying to do right by each other, doing completely wrong. Yeah,
it's true.
Anyway, we've definitely gone off topic.
Yeah,
the point that I was trying to, when I was trying to compare Maya, was that the Buddhist equivalent of that, in a slightly pure way, but I think it's probably true, is that if we don't exist as an independent entity and we are just a part of one ginormous whole, then that removes from us some of that kind of like identity with a small I. And I think that as a result of that, that's why you can feel loving kindness for people that you should hate. Now, of course, there's a challenge in that as well, because I'm pretty sure that most people listening to this podcast, if I said, I one time when I was doing that, I felt loving kindness for Donald Trump, which is what I actually did do, because it was the first person that jumped into my head when she said, now think of somebody that, I can't remember how she worded it. She definitely didn't say someone you dislike, because that's not the sort of words they use. Someone you find challenging, I think. And so, you know, and in all seriousness, I don't really have anybody in my life.
I thought you just went back to using me.
You're all three. No. But, you know, I genuinely, and I'm really happy to say this, and I don't know if this is my attitude or whether it's just because I lead such a small life, I really don't engage with anybody on a daily basis outside of, you know, like I said last week, sometimes difficult customers or people that don't let me cross the road at pedestrian crossings. Who don't have faces to me, really. There's not really any in my life, like actively in my life, that I could think of who I have a difficult relationship with. I tend to have quite nice relationships with everybody, and if I don't have a nice relationship with you, then I probably just don't know you anymore. So I couldn't really, so I had to think of sort of someone quite obscure. But of course that, I don't think most people would think that was all right. If you said, when I got to that point, I thought of loving kindness for, you know, I don't know, Gary Glitter, people would be like, you're a fucking monster. You can't say you love Hitler or but of course ultimately in Buddhism that is what you're aiming for, and one of the reasons why you're aiming for that is that what use is it me hating anybody? But I mean, you know, take for example, you know, the worst person that you can think of, Ian Watkins from Steps. No, I'm kidding. You know, like what is good is it me hating that person? I mean, you know, and you could definitely argue, well, what good is it you loving them? But I mean, I suppose, and maybe that's the big question. Maybe that. I mean, we are going to have to come to an end.
Happy, isn't it? That's when you've said this to me before, and I can't remember where it comes up. But like, if you don't know what to do, if you've got a decision to make or a way to feel,
it's fucking Mo Gawdat.
It is Mo Gawdat, isn't it? Yeah, but it's do the one that will make you happier. And do you know what? Loving that person might not make you happier, but hating that person will make you miserable.
Yeah, and actually, ultimately, that's interesting. That we are going to have to call it a day. But that. So maybe going back to our discussion last week of how we ended up here now, talking about this subject on a podcast and going to a Buddhist group. Yeah. Do you know what? I don't know why, but when I read Mo Gawdat's book Soul for Happy, and he actually talks. He's not a religious person as such, but he talks about a higher power. Maybe we'll need to discuss that.
He's mathematically proven the higher power.
Yeah, so
like a prop in there.
That's not for now because that's a long conversation. Yeah. But one of the reasons I was thinking about religion and what we've lost as a result of not having religion, or maybe more selfish than that, what I've lost.
Yeah.
I mean, I've never had religion, but
but what
I don't have as a result of not having religion, and thinking about things like lack of community, the loneliness epidemic that's going on, a lack of meaning, all of these things. And it's like, well, all of those things were, whether you like it or not, if you believed in religion, most of those things go away. You have all of those things. And one of the reasons why I even started thinking about religion, and one of the reasons why probably I personally have ended up going to a Buddhist group, was that exact thing that you've just brought up. It was that what Mo Gawdat said was, like you said, if you don't know, if you have absolutely no way of knowing, factually something, choose to believe the thing that makes you most happy. And the thing is, to hear that, you sort of think, oh yeah, well, of course that would be nice if you could do that. But the thing, what you don't realise is that you're doing that either way.
Yeah.
So what I naturally do, so if I think to myself, I don't know if there is a God, for example, and I don't know, and I never will know, I will never find out for absolute certain. I will go to my death, as will everybody else, without ever actually knowing for sure one way or the other.
Unless he speaks to you.
But if he speaks to you, then you could be mad.
True.
So I mean, there's
you probably are mad.
Yeah, well, yeah. But so as a result of that, you can either choose, you can say, it doesn't matter what, like science has not disproved that there is a God. It's disproved probably, you could say, the Bible. It's disproved what we but it hasn't disproved anything. It might. So in that context, what we all naturally do is we choose to believe in the one that's going to give us no joy whatsoever. Yeah. Because otherwise we'll look a bit silly. And I thought to myself, shit, that's something where what would I choose? That was really what I... Yeah. And I still haven't got an answer, by the way. So I'm not saying all of a sudden I believe in God or anything, but what do you choose? If you... What makes you happy? And I look around, and everyone I know and probably have ever known pretty much, outside of a handful of people, have been atheists. And I don't think that that's bringing them very much happiness.
No.
And the thing is they would say, yeah, but you'd be an idiot to believe in, I believe in that because that's what's clearly real.
But also,
the thing
it's your belief
not.
I'm an idiot, and that's only going to make you upset.
But, yeah. So, I mean, I suppose so ultimately, the reason that I bring that up is, the reason why I discussed that is because you brought it up, and it suddenly reminded me that literally that sentence in one book that I read, whatever it was, 2 years ago, sent me down a path of like, I should probably start thinking about this sort of stuff. Yeah. And just try and work out what it is that I'm choosing, where it is that I'm choosing to believe in things which are actively making me miserable. And it's changed my life.
I think that you haven't chosen to believe or not believe, you've chosen to be curious.
Yeah,
which is
probably
just a little bit up from nothing.
But also, but
it makes the difference. It tips it into the positive. You know what I mean? If it was a.
But it suits me as well. Yeah. That's the other thing. So again, it's a very selfish thing, isn't it? Choose to believe in the thing that makes you happy.
Yeah.
Right. So if the thing that makes you happy would be, I believe there's a man with a beard in the sky and he's looking after me. Choose to believe that.
Yeah.
If what actually makes you happy is, I believe we're just here by complete random chance. Yeah. Every single decision I make is purely just chemicals going around in my brain. I don't have a soul. I'm nothing. I'm just, and there's worth in that. But I don't see how that can make many people happy. Although, of course, the no self Buddhist idea is not a million miles away from that. And,
it's also what you do with it.
Yeah. But for me, actually, what makes me happy is just being curious, because I quite like being curious, because I quite like learning about things.
Yeah.
And going on journeys. So actually, if I decided, absolutely. I mean, I think if I decided, there's a man with a beard in the sky, I'd probably be just as miserable as I was when I didn't believe in that. So it's making the decision that's going to make you happy, no matter how obscure or weird that happens to be.
Yeah.
But one thing that's definitely not going to make you happy is, I hate this person I've never met.
Yeah.
Definitely. And don't really even know that much about. I've just been told that they're a fascist, so therefore I hate them.
Yeah.
Either stop thinking about them or find out about them.
Yeah. I completely agree. Choose to be curious. Choose to be happy. Happy days.
I don't know whether we've done a good job of describing this.
We got
group
up to
or
the
not.
tea break, I think.
Yeah, so I don't know. Maybe we'll come back to this on the next episode.
I think, yeah, like, we didn't really discuss much of the teachings, but I'm not going to lie, whether I remember those teachings well enough to discuss them would be a whole nother shenanigan. But by the next episode, we'll be on a couple more. Who knows what we'll be talking about by then?
Who knows? But we will be talking about something. It will be in 2 weeks' time.
Yeah.
We're now going off to see Shed 7 in Margate.
Mm-hmm.
Wish us luck. I don't know why we'd need luck. Hanging around with a bunch of other middle-aged people and just sort of bobbing our heads for 2 hours. But
well, wish us luck.
But and we wish you luck.
Yeah.
And we send loving kindness in your general vicinity and direction.
Yeah. For all those.
And as I said that, I'm not fucking kidding. As I said that, the sun came out in a magical. I'm not. I don't think you can see it from where you're sitting. I'm sitting looking out the window, and as I said that about loving kindness, it was like someone turned the light on outside. The sun must have come from behind a cloud. So that means that you really did get it. There you go. I hope that you are feeling swaddled with David's love right now. If you are, feel free to email me at shamcityroasters@gmail.com. David, I'm swaddled with your love. And we will be back in 2 weeks' time. This has been the Sohbet Punx Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Tell your friends if you would like. Ta-ra. Bye. Loving kindness to you all. Ciao.